Hello and welcome to Albert Rants. I am Albert Lirio, and today we will be talking about the very controversial anti-terror bill, which, as of the time of this recording, is still awaiting for the president's signature in Malacanang. Last night, the Justice Department reportedly has already submitted their report, their judicial review on the anti-terror bill. They will be submitting that to Malacanang. That's actually one of the things that the president is awaiting before he could decide on whether to sign, veto, or you know, kung isasantabi niya itong bill na ito. So well, in this episode, we're gonna be talking about that, and bakit nga ba gano'n na lang yung pagka-against ng mga tao with regards this law. So, but before that, let's begin by some fast facts about the anti-terror bill. Just to give you an overview, I know this has been tackled in numerous news articles, investigative news reports, and these are just some of the things that I compiled that could pretty much sum up the whole thing. But again, if you would wish to learn more about this, the resources are readily available on the internet, and I think the final version of the bill is also up on the Congress website or somewhere. It's on the internet. Kaya parang everything naman is on the internet these days. So, ayun. Let's get to some of the facts about the anti-terror bill. So, what is actually the anti-terror bill? So, this bill seeks to amend the Human Security Act of 2007, which is prior to the conception and the creation of this bill is, from what I understand, this HSA is the anti-terrorism law of the Philippines ever since. So aside, of course, from the provisions in the revised penal code on acts of terrorism. So that in the Human Security Act of 2007, that is the legal weapons of the state against terrorism and terrorist acts. It was passed in February in the Senate as Senate Bill 1083, and then it was actually put on hold, syempre, as everything had been since this whole boom of COVID-19. But again, the talks resumed in the House, I think in May or April, and then they had their own separate version, but in the end, after the deliberations, they just opted to shift to the Senate version, which is, according to some lawmakers, a very draconian measure. According to, I think this is Albay Representative Ed Selagman who said this, that the Senate version, or the version passed essentially to Malacanang, is a draconian measure. And then but the second question you might be asking is, bakit nga ba gano'n na lang yung opposition or yung pagtutol ng marami dito sa anti-terrorism bill? I mean, it has sparked a conversation online. Even artists who haven't spoke out before are now speaking out on the gravity of the scope of this bill. So it really is, or it really begs the question, why the discussion on this bill? So according to a lawyer for the Commission on Human Rights, Rosel Tugade, here are some of the things that the anti-terror bill does different from the Human Security Act of 2007. So first, it aims to penalize proposal to commit terrorism. That, I think, that was not in HSA. Threat to commit terrorism and inciting to commit terrorism. Those are three things, and I'm just gonna give you a rundown of what those of how they differ from each other. So, proposal to commit terrorism is committed when a person who has decided to commit any of the crimes or the acts of terrorism defined in the law proposes to commit that or to execute that or to do that. So basically, any statement or act of saying na I will do this act of terrorism, that could get you into jail under the Antiterrorism Bill. This provision was not penalized or was not in the Human Security Act of 2007. Next is threat to commit terrorism. So it is defined as any person who shall threaten to commit any of the acts mentioned in Section 4 shall suffer the penalty of imprisonment of 12 years. So according to Attorney Tugade, this provision is vague on what constitutes a threat to commit terrorism. So it could also give the rise to interpretations that may include a wide range of acts. So actually reading this earlier, medyo malabo nga na parang wala siyang context, na parang sinabi lang niya na any person who shall threaten to commit any act of terrorism. But how will they actually find out, or how are they certain that this person is inside or threatening to commit terrorism? And finally, inciting to terrorism, Section 9, any person who, without taking any direct part in the commission of terrorism, shall incite others to the execution of any of the acts specified in the law by means of speeches, proclamations, writings, emblems, banners, or other representations tending to the same end, shall suffer the penalty of imprisonment of 12 years. So basically, this says na kahit you are not directly involved in, per se, the act of terrorism, if you speak out in support, or you write something that you side with this, or you support this ideology or something, according to Attorney Rosel Togade, that could potentially violate essentially the freedom of expression. So that is how scary this bill is. And also, it actually extended the 3-day period for detention without warrant to 2 weeks, 14 days. And that 14 days is still extendable to 10 more days. So in total, you could be charged, or you could be detained without any charge for 24 days. So that's 8 times the allowable period. So that's something that we should really take note of. Also, another alarming thing is that this law is actually giving the power for the executive branch of government. It is that this law will create a sort of an anti-terrorism council composed of cabinet officials who could decide to tag or label somebody or a person or a group as a terrorist. That's very different from what the Human Security Act does, because in the HSA it actually needs or the only body that could identify someone or some group as a terrorist was a court, and I think that was a regional trial court. But now in this one, the ATC, the Anti-Terrorism Council, could actually label on its own without any court. They could decide to tag somebody or some group as a terrorist. So bakit siya alarming? Kasi it is happening even without the Anti-Terrorism Bill being into law yet. The NTF-LCAC, or the National Task Force to End Local Communist Armed Conflict, has actually tagged the term red tagged some legal organizations as terrorists. I mean, just look at some of these that they tagged as terrorists. The National Union of Journalists in the Philippines, the news websites of alternative media outlets Bulatlat and Northern Dispatch, media outfits Altern Media Network, Kodao Productions, Tudla Productions, and Kilab Multimedia, as well as student organizations, College Editors Guild of the Philippines, and Union of Journalists in the Philippines, UP Diliman. They say that, quote-unquote, these are creations of the Communist Party of the Philippines, which that's quite a stretch. I mean, they did not provide any evidence na parang sinabi lang nila na they declared na these organizations are communists, they are terrorists. Parang ganun lang yung ginawa nila eh. And this is actually still up on their social media accounts. I mean, if you check the NDF LCAC Twitter and Facebook, it's still there, and they're not deleting it. And it actually included even some party lists. I mean, I think Bayan Muna is there, Kabataan party list is there, and Gabriela party list is there. And these are party lists elected in Congress. So yeah, ayun. It's very terrifying na kahit na hindi pa siya naipapasa, itong Antiterror Bill, hindi pa siya naipapasa bilang batas. Kung rampant na yung red tagging katulad nito, it's giving out the impression na they could easily red tag you. And they could easily tag you a terrorist, and they could easily arrest you. Diba? They could easily charge you because they said it's their word against yours na they said you're a terrorist. You say it's not. But who's in power? Who will the people believe more? Diba? So it's actually very, very alarming kasi alam naman natin na, or in some aspect, maganda yung intent ng bill. Maganda yung intent ng panukalang batas na to quell terrorism. But gaya nung sabi nung iba, some of these are actually already in the revised penal code. These are already laws enacted before, and these have been instituted in our laws in the Philippine Constitution. So what else is there a need for the anti-terror bill? Some critics actually fear that this has actually nothing to do, or very, very little to do, with terrorism, but more on silencing the critics and silencing dissent against the government. I mean, we have seen that. We have seen how this government has reacted to open criticism about them, which has made its way into the public, to the public conversation. For example, the closest that we could actually link this is to ABS-CBN and Rappler. Una, ABS-CBN, it has already been shut down. Right now, ABS-CBN is not airing. And why? Because they have been critical of the president. I mean, we have heard and we have watched before how the president threatened to shut down ABS-CBN, and he did it. And he also threatened to shut down Rappler, although that did not happen. Look at what is happening to Rappler right now. Their CEO, Maria Ressa, has been convicted of cyber libel, which also is a very, very problematic decision, according to some of my acquaintances, which I have talked to this about, na medyo may problema or may problems yung decision na inilabas with regards to the Maria Ressa case. But that will be for another episode. Hopefully, I could get some sort of a lawyer or a law student to talk to me about this. So, ayun. And note na these two, apart from the threats to shut down, they were also victims of red tagging. They were linked to the Aus Duterte Matrix, which was released by Malacanang. I think that was last year. Some of the personalities of ABS-CBN, and I think I'm not that sure about the ABS-CBN as a whole, pero imagine that included Gretchen Ho, Heidi Diaz of all people, na they were linked to the president, and Rappler, the whole company itself, was actually in there. And nung tinanong si yung presidential spokesperson at that time, he said na or nung tinanong kung paano ba yung linkages doon sa matrix na iyon na inilabas nila, sabi na lang niya, tanggapin nyo na lang kasi galing kay presidente. So, yeah, they could easily tag you as a terrorist without any sort of evidence against you. Diba? Without any support to their claim, which is number one, very, very wrong sa research. Ayun. Second, more recently, Dr. Tony Liachon, special advisor to the COVID-19 task force, was asked to resign after criticism of the DOH's COVID-19 response. How did that happen? Dr. Tony Liachon tweeted this, and I quote, "Forgive me, I think the lead agency, that's DOH, has lost focus in everything. Risk communication, priorities, data management, and execution of all plans." And after that, he supposedly received a letter or a message, a communications from Malacanang saying that the presidential spokesperson and the health secretary did not like that statement. And then a day later, he tweeted this. He tweeted this quote by Friedrich Nietzsche. "People don't want to hear the truth because they don't want their illusions destroyed." And then, hours later, that afternoon, he announced that he has officially resigned from his post as a National Task Force COVID-19 Special Advisor. It's very, very alarming na ganun sila mag-respond to criticism. If you don't like us, you're out. And even some of the appointees of President Duterte has resigned from their positions because some sort of they did not or they were not in sync with what they want. You know who they are, okay? So, for example, former DICT Undersecretary Eliseo Rio resigned in May. Why? He cited internal conflicts with other officials on the DICT's millions of pesos in confidential funds and apparent friction with new appointees. Rio questioned DICT's multi-million peso confidential fund, and because of that, he resigned because of internal conflicts. But he retracted that statement earlier, saying that his resignation was due to personal reasons. Are you sure? Sure ka na ba dyan? I think I'd rather believe that initial statement. Also, even one of the Dutertes' most trusted appointees, Ernesto Pena, former Socioeconomic Planning Secretary, resigned in April. Pena cited personal reasons and differences in development philosophy with some of his fellow cabinet members. He actually said this, and I quote, "I seem to be a dissonant voice among others. I thought I should just quit." So that's it. The dissonance. If you are dissenting or expressing dissent and dissonance against the one who is leading, you're out, because they want to live in that bubble that everything is going according to their plan and everyone is subscribing to that ideology that, hey, this plan is great. Let's do this and only this. And while we're doing this, we're actually doing great, even though they're not in reality. And again, more critics have been silenced over the years. Former Chief Justice Sereno, Senator De Lima, they were similar to what happened to ABS-CBN and Rapper. They were forced to shut up. Sereno was ousted as Chief Justice. De Lima was detained. They have no capacity for dissent. That's what I'm saying here. But the difference is when it's a yes man, so quote unquote, a yes man of Duterte, it's a different case. For example, NCRPO Chief Sinas, who inspired an Independence Day rally for his Mañanita. Physical or social gatherings are disallowed or unallowed during at the time of enhanced community quarantine, and yet the police, who are supposed to be enforcing the law, is the one breaking it. What did Duterte say? He trusts Sinas. He will not be asked to resign. But supposedly the probe is ongoing. But yeah, I reckon to believe that they will actually side with what the person in power wants. So and also with the case of the health secretary himself na nakabanggaan ni Dr. Tony Liachon. He is being asked to resign since last month for the mishandling of the COVID-19 crisis. Gaya nga nung sinabi ni former Special Advisor Dr. Leah Chon, sabi niya, risk communication, priorities, data management, execution of plans, walang focus. But Duterte says that he still trusts the health secretary. And the health secretary said he is at the pleasure of working for the president. So, I think that's medyo off kasi we're dealing with a public health crisis and you have actually to appeal to the people because you're the one enforcing the guidelines of the quarantine, Wala lang. Nakakatawa lang talaga. Oo. And ayun nga, again, rampant red tagging of activists, of criticisms, of critics, of dissenters, even before the passage of the Antiterror Bill into law. What do we expect if it finally has been enacted into law? We can only expect it to become worse. Not only this progressive groups could be tagged as terrorists, na kahit na nga yung mga NGO na tumutulong lang, baka sila madagdag na din. We have actually cases of this during the lockdown. Mayo 1, those arrested in Norzagaray doing relief operations, yung inaresto no Mayo 1 doing a feeding program, and even yung dispersal sa sitio San Roque sa Quezon City na nagluluto lang sila at nakita ng mga enforcers na may placards, dinismantle or pinatigil yung kusinang bayan sa sitio San Roque. Diba? Kahit mga normal na tao na tumutulong, hindi sila safe. I mean, you're doing a good job and yet you go to jail for what? For suspicion that you are to commit terrorism? What? Does it even make sense? And kahit yung mga supporters, yung mga umuwing OFWs, most of Duterte's support allegedly or supposedly comes from OFWs, from Filipinos working abroad. And now OFWs are coming back home due to the COVID-19 crisis. And kahit sila, hindi sila ligtas. Kasi yung mga nagre-reklamong OFW, well, they are also being threatened to shut up. They are being forced to shut up. Ginagawa na nila ito. Kasi during the early days of the lockdown, I don't know if until now they're doing this, but one of the guidelines for staying in a quarantine facility ay bawal mag-grant or bawal ka magpa-interview sa media or mag-post sa social media ng kahit ano. There were even reports that of the quarantine officials are confiscating their phones. Diba? So, nakakabahala. I mean, the passage of the Antiterror Bill, it's good to quell terrorism because meron naman talaga, may problema, nagkakaroon tayo ng pulupulutong na problema with terrorism. We have Marawi siege. I think that's in 2018. Diba? Pero siguro, we also have to consider who the bill is working for and how it will be implemented and the gross implications of or the possible scenarios when the bill is finally implemented. It's scary. And especially knowing what this government has done in the past with those who criticize them, who give comments about their leadership, it's very, very scary because one way or another, even this podcast, even I, could be threatened to be put to jail because of my comments, which if you have been listening to the show for quite some time for the past year, I am very vocal of my criticism against some of the policies that they are implementing, and it may come to a time that this could be the last episode of Albert Rants, because after this terror bill has passed, it's either I shut this down or I become a lapdog too. And that's it for this episode of Albert Rants. I hope I sparked some conversation on the anti-terror bill and its implications. And I do hope that you find it in your heart to study the bill more, even if you're not a law student. Just study and imagine the possible scenarios, some of which I mentioned earlier, yung possible scenarios na pwedeng mangyari if this bill is passed into law. Again, I am Albert Perio. This has been Albert Rants. I'll see you in the next one.